Hello, good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, or good whatever time of night or day it happens to be, wherever you happen to be. Welcome to Republic News. I'm your hostess, Liviana. This particular episode of Republic News, I will be joined by my boyfriend, known variously as Lunar 5, Lord Flappy Hat, and Pepper. We will be discussing primarily the platform policies of Andrew Yang, a candidate for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. As our discussion of the platform policies of this fellow is rather extensive, although not exhaustive, I will be dividing this episode of Republic News into 2 or 3, maybe even 4 separate videos, so as not to overwhelm you. The final recorded version of our initial discussion was a little over 2 hours and 45 minutes. So I'm thinking once I have completed the edit of the entire stream, it may be 3 videos of approximately 50 minutes each, 50 as in 50. So I will return, or I will be back with my boyfriend after the intro. Hello, good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, or good whatever time of night or day it happens to be, wherever you happen to be. Welcome to Republic News Saturday, for your Saturday of the 30th of March, 2019. I am your hostess, Liviana, and with me this evening, I have my boyfriend, known variously as Lunar 5 and Lord Flappy Hat and Pepper and various other things. Say hello.
No.
Alright, so we're going to talk about a variety of things this evening or this morning, depending on where you are in the United States. I think it's still evening out on the West Coast, and certainly in Alaska and Hawaii, but where I am, it's morning. So one of the things that we are going to look at during this night time is the policies of one of the Democratic candidates for the nomination for president, so-called Mr. Andrew Yang. And so the big thing for which he is known is his proposal of a universal basic income. Now, he has on his website a page called Policies, and it says Our Policies, Yang 2020, and the big three policies he has, and the first one listed is universal basic income, then Medicare for all, then human-centered capitalism. We're going to talk about these three things straight up here. So I'm going to dive into this first one here, UBI, or Universal Basic Income, which if you click on that link, it takes you to a page called The Freedom Dividend. And let's see, I'm not going to read the entire thing because he goes on for, it's not a very long, by my standards, piece, but I think some of you would regard it as long. So I'm just going to read the brief part of it. And then he does have another link for learn more about universal basic income. He's got problems to be solved, goals, guiding principles. As president, I will, an excerpt from the War on Normal People. Learn more, join the fight, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so in the brief about his so-called freedom dividend, his universal basic income, he says, Andrew would implement a universal basic income, the freedom dividend, of $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year for every American adult over the age of 18. This is independent of one's work status or any other factor. This would enable all Americans to pay their bills, educate themselves, start businesses, be more creative, stay healthy, relocate for work, spend time with their children, take care of loved ones, and have a real stake in the future. Any change to the freedom dividend would require a constitutional amendment. It will be illegal to lend or borrow against one's dividend. A universal basic income at this level would permanently grow the economy by 12.56 to 13.10%, or about $2.5 trillion by 2025, and it would increase the labor force by 4.5 to 4.7 million people. Putting money into people's hands and keeping it there would be a perpetual boost and support to job growth and the economy. So there are some issues with this. No, I mean, I can certainly point you to a variety of wait a minute here. There's a little bit more here that comes before his problems to be solving. The most direct and concrete way for the government to improve your life is to send you a check for $1,000 every month and let you spend it in whatever manner will benefit you the most. The government is not capable of a lot of things, but it is capable of sending large numbers of checks to large numbers of people promptly and reliably. We have plenty of resources. They're just not being distributed to enough people right now. Let's build a new kind of economy, one that puts people first. If there is one policy that would transform American lives for the better, it is universal basic income. Okay, so as I said, there are a number of economists I could point you to who have criticized this idea that his universal basic income is going to grow the economy. In fact, it's going to grow inflation and not the economy. There won't be people taken out of the workforce because they're not going to work if they can get a real free ride. But this isn't even a free ride. We're talking about $1,000 a month. That's less than you get on Social Security at some of the high, I mean, even medium level Social Security monthly payments are more than this. And most people who are getting just a Social Security check aren't able to make ends meet. A fixed income of this sort is really detrimental and harmful to the economy. People need to have disposable cash. And anyway, let me dive into what I have to say about it. So I have back on the 21st, he tweeted something out. It might have been the 20th, because I think I posted this on the 21st at 2 a.m. So it would have been the day before. So it was probably March the 20th or March the 19th when he posted, because I think his post was already a day old when I finally decided to reply to it. or his tweet rather. So his tweet reads as follows: "We are the richest society in the history of the world. $20 trillion gross domestic product, up $5 trillion in the last 12 years alone. We can easily afford a dividend of $1,000 a month per adult if that's what we want to do. Anyone who says we don't have the money isn't looking at the right numbers." End quote. So in response, I wrote, okay, I quoted this in Latin. I'm not going to overwhelm you with the Latin. I am just going to give my own translation of this passage from Juvenal's Satires, 1077 to 81. Quote, "Already long ago, from when votes to no one we sold, we shed trusteeships. For who once gave command, consulships, legions, all things, now it self-restrains, and two things only timidly hopes for, bread and circuses." End quote. This is the origin of the term bread and circuses, which you will hear people talk about in terms of economics and politics. So then I continued with my tweet thread. As the Republica Romana declined toward what would be known as the Imperium Romanum, the politicians of the society approved laws to provide cheap food and entertainment to the masses. This act was not one of benevolence, but rather of greed and lust for power. Ambition is made of sterner stuff than benevolence, after all. By providing wheat, the bare necessity of nourishment, to the masses, the ambitious doled out a subsistence-level existence. The masses could survive on such fare, but just survive. $12,000 per year. And won't you, Andrew, tell the good people of America exactly what they are required to sign away in order to opt into your UBI scheme? And won't you make plain what a VAT is, a value-added tax? And won't you admit that any kind of sales tax, including a VAT, discriminates against the poor and the working class? And won't you confess that this is nothing but a neoliberal objectivist attempt to sprinkle a few crumbs from the table of the 1% in order to keep the masses distracted, while the already obscenely wealthy become even wealthier, and the people in elected office usurp more power and deprive the people of even more of their liberties, until, at last, the citizen becomes little more than a serf, and that only if he or she be lucky? Won't you tell these good people why Milton Friedman supported, and the Koch brothers currently support, a UBI? Won't you stop pretending to be progressive and let them know what you really are? Why even suggest an additional tax to cover such a paltry amount when the U.S. federal government is the monopoly issuer of a sovereign, free-floating, non-convertible fiat currency? To your UBI scheme, I respond by insisting on a federal jobs guarantee at a living wage as part of a Green New Deal with a national improved and expanded Medicare for all, and a basic income, not universal basic income, but a basic income only for those unable to work. You are a one-trick pony, Andrew, and your one trick is trying to convince these good people that a UBI would in any way benefit them. Now, I posted this on the 21st or so, and he has yet to reply. He never has given me a reply. I also want to point out exactly what kind of a one-trick pony he is. It's a Trojan horse. You see, the whole point of this UBI, the reason Milton Friedman supported it, the reason the Koch brothers support it even now, is because what you have to sign away in order to opt into Andrew Yang's UBI scheme is your future claim on Social Security, disability, SSI, and assorted other social programs. You're not going to get those. You're going to sign those away. You're going to sign away your right to them. And so the point of this entire scheme is to privatize those programs. This is something that neoliberals and objectivists and neo-objectivists have been drooling over, the idea of pushing this forward. Now, Yang will claim to you that Martin Luther King Jr. supported a universal basic income. This is not true. Dr. King supported a jobs guarantee. And there are a number of economists, Pavlina Cherneva, Warren Mosler, Matthew Forstater, Ellis Winningham, Stephanie Kelton, and several others who have talked about federal jobs guarantee. And the federal jobs guarantee will grow the economy, unlike a UBI where you're giving people $1,000 a month. But you know what his proposal is? If you watched the Jimmy Dore show, Jimmy did an interview with him on Thursday, and he talked about this value-added tax on goods that you're purchasing from Amazon, and it's a sales tax. Basically, you, the consumer, will be paying the tax for your $1,000 a month. This doesn't even make sense. He's also opposed to breaking up these big companies
if I
like...
may interject?
Huh?
If I may interject?
Yes.
Basically, think of it as your bank charging you every time you wanted, charging you a fee every time you wanted to access the money in your checking account.
Yeah. So, in short, you would be getting less than $1,000 a month because you would be having to pay for it yourself in the form of a sales tax, essentially. And I don't, there are places in this country where $1,000 a month isn't even enough to rent a one-bedroom efficiency apartment. When I pointed this out to some people on Twitter, they're like, well, then you're just going to have to live with somebody else. I'm like, what part of one-bedroom efficiency apartment do you not get? I mean, seriously, it's not like you're renting a two-bedroom apartment or something, even a normal one-bedroom apartment. This is a one-bedroom efficiency apartment. Okay, it's for one person to live in. Why would now? Oh, but this is if you're married, then your husband gets $1,000 a month too. So that's $2,000 a month. And if you got kids, each one of them gets $600 a month. So like, let's say you've got 2 kids, you get your. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're not realizing the fact that for each individual in the household, there's that much more money that has to go out just for fucking food, people. I don't know anybody who can, like, let's say in those places where you can get a one-bedroom efficiency for less than $1,000 a month, and in most places it's more than $1,000 a month, but especially on the coasts. But let's say you're in one of the interior states where you can get a one-bedroom efficiency apartment for maybe $750, $800 a month. That's going to leave you with $200 to $250 a month. That's what you have left over to pay your electric bill, your water bill, your gas bill, maintenance on your car, gasoline for your car, auto insurance, health insurance, and to buy food with. I mean, I don't know anybody alive who can live on $200 to $250 worth of groceries in a month. I'm sorry, prices have increased, but they have, and it's not my fault. I certainly didn't approve this. But this is the harsh reality of the life that we have now. And there have been studies done and reports made over the past few years, which have talked about how much minimum wage would be right now if it had kept pace with the cost of living increase. And one of the earlier ones that I read said it would be at least $22 a month, and that would be in most states, and in some states it would be $25 or more dollars a month. Now they're saying it would be $32 a month anywhere, and more than that in some places. So like if you're on the Pacific coast, the West Coast, if you're on the East Coast, you're probably going to need more than that to make minimum wage, because minimum wage is not supposed to be the bare minimum needed to subsist. It's supposed to be the bare minimum needed to live. If you're just living from paycheck to paycheck, and in some cases working 2 or 3 part-time jobs and juggling bills, by which I mean, people who don't understand what juggling bills actually means, this is when I pay the electric company this month and the phone company next month, and I don't pay the electric company next month, and I don't pay the phone company this month. That way I juggle the bills. I pay one company one month and the other company the next month. And I'm I'm going in the hole. I'm going into debt each time because I'm not able to pay the full amount each time. The first couple of months it works out okay because I can pay my bill for the electric company in full, and then next month I pay my phone bill for this month in full. And as time goes on, I build up a considerable debt. But as long as I'm paying a full month, then I'm not getting my service shut off, but I'm going deeper and deeper into debt. I did a calculation a while back on Google Plus, and I've searched for it and I can't find it. I think that the original post to which I was replying was deleted by the person who posted it, because I demonstrated to them why minimum wage needs to be more than $15 a month. Okay, I took this $15 a month, which is not the amount paid anywhere except in certain companies, and I did the calculations based on average cost of living in the United States, and it was by 2015, 2016, 2017, and might have had one for 2018. So I had to go with different figures because I didn't have full figures for any given year. But the point was, even if it had been 2018, it would have been more than what I came up with. The average cost of living for a person, one person, single person, making $15 a month in an urban environment in most of the country, not on the coasts, but in the vast interior where cost of living is a little bit less expensive in most places. A person living in an urban environment would be going $100 into the hole each month. The only extra that I put on this was what was given on these websites for what they called entertainment, and that was only like $105 a month. And I don't know what they mean by entertainment. It might be like going to the movies or going to a sporting event or going to a concert or whatever. Okay, and I think this is a reasonable thing to include, because people, can't just live on bread alone. You have to have something to live for. If you're just surviving, what's the point? So, and I mean, that was one of the reasons that the Roman leaders gave people the circuses as well. And circuses are not like Barnum and Bailey. They're like the circus. Circus in Latin refers to a specific type of outdoor arena that's circular in shape. So they would have things like chariot races and gladiatorial games and so forth. The point is, you have to have some kind of entertainment in order, this was even done just to keep the masses distracted. And yes, I'm getting off topic, but I want to explain what I'm talking about. So anyway, for a person living in an urban environment in most of the country, as in not on the coasts, the average at $15 a week, $15 an hour, working 40 hours a week, which is full time, and not getting any overtime, they would be going $100 into the hole each month. So in 2 months, they're $200 into the hole. In 3 months, they're $300, and so forth. You get it. If they were living in a rural environment, they would be going $500 into the hole each month. And the difference has to do with the fact that people living in a rural environment have to spend a little more money on gasoline, a little bit more money on auto maintenance, upkeep and so forth, because there's more wear and tear. When you live on a dirt road with gravel on it, your tires get worn out more quickly, your air filter has to be replaced more quickly and so forth. But also, the big thing is internet access. Because if you live in town or in a city, you can get unlimited data plus maybe a phone, landline, or plus maybe cable or something like that for less than $50 a month. If you live out in the country, good luck, because what you're going to wind up with is either satellite internet, which is basically useless for, say, online gaming or being a YouTuber and trying to do live streams. And it's if you get Wi-Fi, either way, you're going to wind up with overage charges if you go over the amount of data that they allow you. And many of the Wi-Fi companies don't even offer an unlimited package, and when they do, it's dropping you down to 3G or lower. With the satellite internet, what you get is unlimited from like midnight to 7 or 8 in the morning, which would be fine for a nocturnal person like myself, but for most people it's not really feasible because they're up during the day. So what do you get during the day with these satellite internet providers? 1 gig. 1 gig per day. And if you go over, you have overage fees. Now with the Wi-Fi internet providers, you're going to get an overage fee of about $10 per gig. But with the satellite internet service providers, you're going to get an overage fee of $15 to $20 per gig. So you're going in the hole again. So that's the biggest difference between living in an urban and a rural environment. And you're like, well, you don't need internet. Well, yeah, you do, because everything that can be done anymore has to be done on the internet. I'm sorry. I mean, there are places in these rural areas where they don't even have a Walmart. You have to drive 30 to 50 miles to get to a Walmart. And as far as local stores, nothing, because Walmart came in, drove them all out of business, and then pulled up stakes and moved away. So they left these communities economically depressed and with no opportunities to do anything. Okay, so back to Andrew Yang. I did point out that when you opt into his so-called freedom dividend, you sign away your rights to Social Security, SSI, disability, and all the things that go with them, which would include Medicaid at the state level and Medicare at the federal level. Let's see, oh yes, and the point of this is to privatize those services. And by privatize, if you don't know what I mean, that means letting private for-profit corporations come in and take them over, so the government isn't doing them anymore. One other thing that he says here, in regard to this, in the tweet that I quoted, he says, well, a couple of other things. We have the quote, we have the richest society in the history of the world, $20 trillion GDP, up $6 trillion in the last 12 years alone. We can easily afford blah blah blah, end quote. Yeah, okay, gross domestic product is a very bad way to measure the economy, because it doesn't measure just resources being produced, it also measures things that are being destroyed. So if you have a house fire, for example, the amount of money that was used to put out the fire, that's counted as part of gross domestic product. There's a thing called genuine progress indicator, or GPI, which is a much more accurate way of looking at the economy. But he is correct. We can easily afford a dividend of $1,000 a month. We can afford a hell of a lot more than that. But he's also not pointing out that on his webpage he said something about resources. Let's see. Oh yes, we have plenty of resources. They're just not being distributed to enough people right now. Yet we do have plenty of resources, and resources for us right now, this is the only constraint on federal government spending. We don't need to have a value-added tax, a sales tax, an income tax, an estate tax, any kind of tax to cover this spending. So there's another scheme where they're going to fuck you over some more by taxing you to cover this expense. The federal government, as I pointed out in my response to his tweet, is the monopoly issuer of a sovereign, free-floating, non-convertible fiat currency. The federal government does not need to tax or borrow in order to fund spending. Federal taxes do not fund federal spending. How is anything paid for? And you may want to ask, how do I know that federal taxes don't fund federal spending? Well, do you ever hear anyone ask how you're going to pay for that when the VAT is a new warplane, a new warship, or a new military venture? No, you don't, because they know exactly how it's going to be paid for. The same way all federal spending is paid for. Congress authorizes the funds, and the Fed moves some ones and zeros around in digital accounts. That's it. Beardsley Rummel pointed this out, January 1946, an article I've read on this channel in the past, and there's more. But the point is, as long as we have sufficient resources to cover the spending, then we can do the spending. The only other constraint would be inflation, and right now that's obviously not a problem because we've had deficit expanding for several years, and yet throughout the entire expansion of the deficit, the inflation rate has stayed stable at right around 2%. So, Rohan Gray, who is, among other things, a research scholar at the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity and a doctoral fellow at Cornell Law School, has tweeted last year as following: a UBI promises 3 things it can't simultaneously deliver to everyone. 1. Liberation from compelled work. 2. Satisfaction basic material needs. And 3. The achievement of 2 via a fixed wage check. Either someone has to keep working or the stuff isn't produced, or prices spiral. Now he goes on to reply in this a subsequent response to this tweet, which has apparently been deleted because I can't see it even in an incognito window. He goes on to respond to someone who said something in response to his initial tweet, and he says, quote, "Then why accuse JG, that is Jobs Guarantee, advocates of being statists, work fetishists? If you concede on principle that UBI works only if a critical mass of people continue to perform socially necessary labor, regardless of whether they would like to or not, you're in the same zone as JG. This was my point to SRW. UBI advocates like to say they don't seriously expect everyone to be liberated from compelled work, but the minute you start talking about socially necessary work from JG perspective, it's all work fetish, work fetish. I'd love to have a serious discussion with UBI advocates about who is going to produce the stuff the UBI check buys and under what labor conditions. Happy to do it over beers or on the record." So there's that. That is something that doesn't often get brought up when we are discussing the UBI and the federal jobs guarantee. The fact is that if you don't have someone producing things, then your UBI isn't going to buy those things because they won't exist. In addition, a lot of people will say, well, there's, automation. You're going to have robots producing everything. No, because robots are not going to produce everything. There are still going to be jobs that have to be done, even with automation. And I mean, if you have any experience at all of the current state of artificial intelligence through algorithms and so forth on YouTube and Twitter and Google and Facebook, you know that they've got a long way to go before they're capable of doing all of the work necessary to be done. In addition, when it comes to, we'll discuss this a bit further later in this video or series of videos. All right, so now you want to talk about the what he has to say about Medicare for All, baby?
Where do I want to start? All right, I'll start here. The Affordable Health Care Act was a step in the right direction, providing funds to states to innovate while expanding Medicaid substantially. However, those expansions were denied by several states because it was up. However, it didn't reduce the fundamental issues plaguing our health system. Access to medicine isn't guaranteed, and incentives for health and providers don't align with providing quality, efficient care. And it must change. God, do I have to read all this?
Just read the brief.
Alright, that was basically the brief. Let's see. Problems need to be solved. Hey, you live in America, you know what the hell the problems need to be solved are. Let's face it. Although one thing he does say is, doctors are incentivized to act as factory workers, churning through patients and prescribing redundant tests, rather than doing what they prefer, spending extra time with each patient to ensure overall health. Although with the huge amount of doctors peddling fentanyl lately, I'd say they're acting more like drug dealers.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, let's face it, that's what they are. As president, he says he will. I mean, I'm not really against the Medicare for All plan. I'm actually for it.
Yeah, I like the original HR 676. I have recently downloaded a PDF of Pramila Jayapal's new Medicare for All House of Representatives bill, but I haven't had a chance to read through it and compare it with the original yet.
But here's a few problems with it. It says he'll work with Congress to create a Medicare for All program or something similar to provide health care to all Americans. Shift the way doctors are compensated to promote holistic and empathetic care, and create incentives for and invest in innovative treatment methods and methodologies. Alright, first off, Congress ain't going to agree to this. At all. They're all bought out by the health insurance industries, by the pharmaceutical industries, and by everything linked to and surrounding healthcare. That's the way they like it. You cannot work with Congress to create a Medicare for All plan. You're going to have to fight them tooth and nail. You're going to have to twist arms. You're going to have to do some pretty sleazy political fuckery.
Well, so many of them are, in the pockets of the pharmaceutical industry and the private for-profit health insurance industry.
Mm-hmm. And just to get an idea of how hard you're going to have to fight, Lyndon Johnson actually had to pull in quite a few favors, twist quite a few arms, and call in every single favor and pull every single trick in the book just to get the Civil Rights Act passed.
Yeah, and do you know why he did that?
Let me guess. You wanted to be president?
No. And did you call him Lindenberg?
I think. I'll call him what I want.
I'll
call him Lady Bird for all I care.
Lyndon Baines Johnson.
His name's Lady Bird.
No, that's his wife's name. And I think that was her actual given name, Lady Bird. Which is interesting. But, his reason for promoting the Civil Rights Act, and I'm not going to repeat the language he used because I don't want to get the channel taken down, but he said, we'll have those N-words voting Democrat for 100 years. Johnson was from the South. He was from Texas. His family came from Arkansas and Texas. There is a lot of sketchy crap they pulled in both Arkansas and Texas in the decades before he entered government. I can't give you the exact information about that, but there was a book that was written while he was president that my dad used to have several copies of. He had like boxes full of these paperbacks that he was giving out to people because he was, my dad was a big player, if you will, in the Republican Party in Texas back in the 60s and 70s. So he had a lot of stuff like that, and this book was called A Texan Looks at Lyndon. I know I've got at least a couple of copies of this paperback somewhere, so I'll have to find those eventually and read one of them. But yeah, there's a lot of sketchy crap with that Johnson family. So.
And the third one is create incentives for and invest in innovative treatment methods and methodologies. Most of these inventions and treatments, they tend to come from universities, so we already are paying for them. That's not to say that they can't come out of private hospitals. It's just that most of them come out of universities, which we pay for with our tax dollars.
No.
Yes.
No.
Fight me.
federal taxes pay for nothing. What happens when you take money in federal taxes is the money is just taken out of circulation. It doesn't exist anymore. That's one of the purposes of taxing at the federal level, is to take excess currency out of circulation. Unfortunately, we have, as Yang said, the wrong people in charge of things, so they're doing stupid shit that doesn't have to be done, like giving tax cuts to the wealthy and increasing the tax burden on the working class.
So yeah, this isn't going to be a complete, hey, let's bash this guy over the head. No. He's actually got some pretty good stuff in here that we actually agree with. Just most of them are either, most of his stuff is either dumb or redundant, or yeah, this will never work
or
because of reasons X, Y, and Z.
Or extreme right wing, like this UBI thing. Alright, so you got anything more to say about this Medicare for All?
Aside from he's going to have to fight tooth and nail and use every single dirty trick in the book to get it passed, no, not really. Alright then.
So, now, for those who are familiar with my channel, there is a video on the channel here that is Margaret Flower's response to Donald Trump on healthcare from a couple of years ago. She gave me permission to mirror her video, which she did on Facebook. So I have it on YouTube on this channel, and I will link that in the video description, where you can hear her talk about what was then HR 676. That was what she called the gold standard for universal health care, or National Improved and Expanded Medicare for All. And there are also links in that video description to find more information at healthoverprofit.org and Physicians for something. I forget now exactly what. But yeah. So the next of Mr. Yang's big three policies is what he calls human-centered capitalism. And right away, right, we're both thinking of Bush's compassionate conservatism and like, yeah, no, there's no such thing as human-centered capitalism. I'm sorry, capitalism exists to expropriate wealth to an ever smaller fraction of the population. That's the whole point of capitalism. It's to hoard wealth for a smaller and smaller minority and fleece the people who actually do the production. People on the right will say, well, no, these are job creators. No, they're not creating jobs, dude. They're not creating jobs. They're not creating anything. They don't produce anything. They don't heal anyone. They don't teach anyone.
Can we get to the...
This is not MMT. This is just good anti-capitalist truth. You know,
from Miss Socialist, can we move to the human capitalism now?
From ancient times, tribalism was a cooperative economy, and Jacques Dumézil wrote a book about the tripartite division of society, which you find mirrored, for example, in Plato talking about his three classes in the Republic. So you had the priesthood, the warriors, and the producers, in Dumézil's terminology. And in Plato's, it was the philosophers, the philosopher kings, the guardians, and the artisans. These so-called capitalists, these people that are in charge, the corporation owners and so forth, they're not performing any religious function, they're not giving people psychological counseling, they're not healing people, they're not teaching people. So they're not part of the priestly or philosopher caste or class. They're not guarding anyone or anything except themselves, so they're not part of the guardian class. They're not putting out fires, they're not, policing the community, none of that stuff. So they're not part of that class. They're not producing anything, whether it be art or otherwise. So they're not part of the producer or artisan class. They're not ranchers or farmers or carpenters or anything of the sort. So what he says here in his brief about human-centered capitalism,
That could be a video in of itself.
Oh, it could, yeah, I guess. Capitalism as an economic system has led to unparalleled innovation and improvement in the human condition. I mean, we did have innovation before capitalism, before mercantilism, before feudalism. So it's not like technological innovation and so forth must have capitalism to be. But anyway, he goes on. Many consider it to have won the war of ideas against socialism, but that simplistic view ignores that there is no such thing as a pure capitalist system, and our current version of institutional capitalism and corporatism is a relatively recent development. Our current emphasis on corporate profits isn't working for the vast majority of Americans. This will only be made worse by the development of automation technology and AI. We need to move to a new form of capitalism, human capitalism, that's geared towards maximizing human well-being and fulfillment. The central tenets of human capitalism are: 1, humans are more important than money. 2, the unit of a human capitalism economy is each person, not each dollar. And 3, markets exist to serve our common goals and values. The focus of our economy should be to maximize human welfare. Sometimes this aligns with a purely capitalist approach where different entities compete for the best ideas, but there are plenty of times when a capitalist system leads to suboptimal outcomes. Think of an airline refusing to honor your ticket because they can get more money from a customer who purchases last minute, or a pharmaceutical company charging extortionate rates for a life-saving drug because the customers are desperate. We need to make the markets serve us rather than the other way around. Profit-seeking companies are organized to maximize their bottom line at every turn, which will naturally lead to extreme policies and outcomes. We need government leaders who are truly laser-focused on the public interest above all else and will lead companies to act accordingly. Okay, so, what he seems to be suggesting is not capitalism at all, but social democracy, where you have a mixed economy with some elements of capitalism and some elements of socialism. And he seems to be also suggesting, although I don't know, he didn't come out and say it in the brief part, he may have said it in some of the more developed stuff, seems to be suggesting, government regulation and oversight. So that certainly would not be pure capitalism. Let's see, there was a thing here. Oh yes, his business about automation and AI. Okay, so I know that people who are on YouTube are familiar with what a crappy job the AI does on YouTube, the algorithms which result in flagging of content without any context consideration, without any intention consideration. There are for example, on Google Plus, which will be gone shortly, the algorithms and the AI never seemed to pick up on anything other than spamming. If you were, there were blatant anti-Semites, and I don't mean people, who oppose Netanyahu's policies. I mean actual anti-Semites. Talking about Jews controlling the world and having Nazi avatars and imagery all over their profiles. And you had to report these people and get other people to report them repeatedly before Google would do anything about them. In some cases, they never did. But when it came to spamming, they acted pretty quick on that. It's just everything else, and yet they're sitting there saying can't have any hate speech, but let anybody on the left say anything that was remotely considered by their AI to be racist or sexist or whatever, boom, they get in trouble. You see the same thing with Twitter. You see the same thing with Facebook. All kinds of people are getting hit with stuff without justification. And the people who are actually spreading hate are allowed basically free rein. Now, I'm of the opinion that if these social media services are the public space now, as they seem to be in many respects, they are public airwaves and so forth, that people are that they should have the right to express themselves, as long as they're not using speech which is likely and intended to cause imminent lawless action, no slandering or libel or that kind of stuff. And there are limitations, in short, on free speech as well as freedom of speech. But if they're going to have these rules and terms of service and so forth, then they need to actually, we're talking about their AI and their algorithm. Also, the UBI suggestion of Yang is not going to resolve automation challenges, and I will link an article in the video description about that as well. So let's see now. Those are his big three policies, which we have now covered. So let's see. This whole explore our platform. You want to go into those now, or should we stop this test and then see how it turned out?
Let's just do it.
Okay.
And if it turns out crappy, no side rants from you.
Oh yes, there are going to be side rants. So, actually, at this point, I'm going to call this the first video in the series of Dang Yang and his gang, and I will take care of the remainder of this rather lengthy stream by dividing it into at least 2 more videos in the series, maybe 4, but I think I can maybe get away with 2 more videos, depending on exactly how much of the original stream remains to be dealt with. So, that being the case, at this point I will simply say, if you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe, and consider sharing on your social media. If you really like the video, oh, and yeah, when you hit that subscribe button, also please ring the bell to be notified of all new content, at least theoretically. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But anyway, and if you really like the content, I do have a Patreon, so please consider becoming my patron through Patreon. The link will be found in the video description. I do have a Discord. Link for that is also in the video description. Until next time, have fun but stay safe. For Republic News, this is Liviana signing off.